So we're going to go ahead and get started. Just started the recording. So good morning to everyone. Um, Again, apologize about Monday. I really wasn't feeling very well, but the lecture from yesterday goes over everything that you need to know for paper 2. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that yet, you will want to do so at your earliest convenience so that you can not only have a really good idea about what we're doing this week, but also what you're doing for the paper. Um, and of course, if you have any questions about anything that I went over in that lecture, you can obviously see me during my office hours, my tutoring hours, or email me. Or, of course, there's the question thread in the discussion board. Okay. So I did update a couple of things inside the announcements section since, actually, even since Monday. Uh, there is, I mentioned this previously, there's a virtual college transfer fair coming up, and that's going to be in October, 3 different time periods in October. And the school sent us more information about that, so I updated the announcement for the virtual transfer fair and gave you some additional information. For these different sessions, they have schedules for them. They're called the Twilight Sessions. And so I have the Twilight Sessions for the 20th, the 21st, and the 22nd here. They're all PDF files, so if you're interested in any of those sessions, you'll want to check out the PDFs for that. And then there is the website that used to be this link right here. It's now been updated. So you'll get the most up-to-date information about the transfer fair at that website. So that's the information, the updated information about the college transfer fair. And again, definitely take advantage of this because I know most of you are looking to either get your 2-year degree here at PGCC and then transfer to a 4-year university, or to take some of your prerequisite classes here and then transfer to a 4-year university. And if you haven't had a chance to go and check out the university that you're thinking about going to, or the several that you're looking to apply to, this virtual transfer fair can put you into direct contact with representatives from those universities. So it's a really good program. I hope you guys take advantage of it. And then the second thing is, on top of the transfer fair that's going on this month, PGCC is also doing a virtual career and internship week. Okay, and that's coming up not next week, but the week after. And if you're looking to participate, you do actually have to do several things before the transfer fair. So, like, I'll just bring up the document here. Where did I have it saved? Yeah. So, especially if you're looking to meet employers, if you're looking to try to get a job or to get an internship, in the document that I uploaded, there's the steps to meet employers, and they have several things that they need you to do before the career workshops, like uploading your resume and things like that. So if you are looking to get an internship or you're looking to apply for jobs, um, you'll want to check this out because they have a whole bunch of different recruiters that they're going to have participating, whether it's a paid position or an internship. But you do have to follow these steps that you see in the document to, get your information set up so that the people that are going to be coming to the internship fair can access your documents. There's also workshops that they are doing in relation to this on resumes, virtual interviewing, soft skills. So all of that is something that you also may want to take advantage of. I don't know how many of you have ever done a virtual interview before. They obviously aren't quite the same thing as a face-to-face interview, so that would be a skill that you would want to check out and get information on. If you don't have a resume yet, then that virtual resume workshop will really help you. So that's something else that you might want to check out. So again, for those of you that are interested, all this information is inside the course right here where it says Fall 2020 Virtual Career and Internship. So the document that we were just looking at is the document that I have right here that you can open. So check those two things out. If you have any questions about anything related to those two events, let me know. But the school is really trying to do as much as it possibly can to give students the same kind of exposure to material as you would if you were in a physical environment. Obviously, this would normally be on campus, but since campus isn't open, they're trying to figure out a way to still get you that material and give you those opportunities. So I think it's pretty awesome what they're doing, and hopefully you'll take advantage of that because you know they're doing this for you. They're not doing it for anyone else but you. So hopefully you'll check that out. All right. So what I want to do today, in the Wednesday, Thursday lecture, so today and tomorrow, is that obviously with paper number 2, research is required. Now we have done some work on works cited pages, and we have done a little bit of work about what constitutes plagiarism and the importance of having both parts of citation, in-text citation, and your works cited page. But this week we also have in-text citation exercises. So what I wanted to do is focus in on how in-text citation works and how you can do it effectively. Okay. All right. So going to type some notes in first before I start showing you some examples. Okay. So to kind of reiterate, any citation requires 2 items: in-text citation and a bibliography. Okay. Bibliography being a list of the sources you used in your paper. Okay. And in-text citation shows your audience when, where, and how much of your sources you are using in your paper. Okay. And so that's why it's important to have both parts of that. Now, this differs from format to format. Like APA isn't exactly like MLA. There are some formats that pretty much do all of the citation as like footnotes at the bottom of the page. Like I was just looking at an article that I wrote because I was looking for examples that I was going to show you guys today. And I came across an article that I was like, oh, I can't really use this because it's not in MLA format because it was in a particular format where everything was in footnotes, and I certainly didn't want to confuse you with that. But it all kind of depends on what your academic discipline uses. And so learning the basics with MLA format gives you a foundation to be able to go, okay, well, when I get into my major program and they use this style, I'll at least have an idea of how that style is similar and different to MLA and what I'll need to change in order to be able to write in that style. Okay. So that's why the majority of English 1010 classes, or just any English Composition 1 class that is taught in any college or university across the United States, will predominantly use either MLA or APA because they are the 2 most common styles, okay, especially with the first 2 years of education, okay. But again, once you get into your major field, you start getting more and more specialized with the classes that you're taking. They will get more specific with what kind of style you're supposed to be using, not only for the presentation of how your paper is supposed to look on the page, but also with the way that you cite outside material. Okay. All right, so that's why it's important to have both of these parts, no matter how it factors into the format that you're using. Obviously, our concentration is on MLA format. So our bibliography is called a works cited. Now, as far as incorporation of sources, whoops, okay. Incorporation of sources in a paper, just to review, there's three main ways that you can bring sources into your paper: summary, paraphrase, and direct quote. And of course, again, those three things. Summary is um, using the source's information, but putting it in your own words and using less space than the source. Paraphrasing is basically doing the same thing, but using about the same amount of space. And direct quote is taking sources information word for word, and in closing, borrowed language inside quotation marks. Okay. And something that I brought up when we were looking at the plagiarism exercises that we did a few weeks ago, and I was going over the answers for that, is you want to have a good mix of all three types of source incorporation. Okay, so you should have some summary, some paraphrase, and some direct quotes. Okay. And I did talk about how sometimes students get heavily reliant upon direct quoting um, because of how safe it is to use. It's the thing that kind of keeps you out of any kind of gray areas related to plagiarism. And so when I say you should have summary, paraphrase, and direct quotes, some students are like, I don't really know about that. I don't think so. I think I'd rather stick to just direct quoting because I can show exactly where in my text my source incorporation is coming from. And I understand because obviously everybody is trying to avoid plagiarism at all costs. Nobody wants to be um, found to be plagiarizing, but summary and paraphrase is an important tool for you to use. It will allow you to get a little bit more source material into your paper because if, say, you're summarizing 3 paragraphs of content and in your paper it's like 3 sentences of content, look how much material you're able to take from that original text and put it in your text. So there's an economy of scale that's at work here that you can use to your advantage by summarizing a source. So keep that in mind. That's really important. You should be able to do all three things and do them correctly. And of course, all three ways to incorporate sources into a paper do require both of those parts of citation, the in-text citation and the bibliography entry. And a really good thing to go back and review are those plagiarism exercises that we did a few weeks ago. Or you can go back and review the lecture where I went over the answers and explained why some things were or were not plagiarized. Because once you see examples, okay, of how somebody's doing it correctly and how somebody's doing it incorrectly, it becomes a lot clearer as to what is plagiarism and what is correct use of a source in a paper. But again, you should not be relying completely on direct quotes when you incorporate sources into your paper. You should have summary and paraphrase too. Okay. So our focus today is on in-text citation. And there's two main ways that you can do in-text citation in a paper, okay, at least in MLA format specifically. Okay. So the first way is to name the source inside the sentence. So when we're looking at um, a an entry on the works cited page, you're going to always have three pieces of information available to you. Okay, sources in a bibliography, because this is also true of APA format. It doesn't change with that either. Are going to begin with one of three pieces of information. Either going to be the author's name, more than one, then it would be the authors, plural. It's going to be either the group or organization, or it's going to be the article or web page title inside quotation marks. You'll always be able to tell what the article title or web page title is by looking at a works cited entry because it'll always be inside quotation marks. And we talked about that when we were doing the works cited page and how when you were looking to see what you needed to re-italicize because the names of publications are always italicized, you knew, okay, there's the database names that I need to italicize, and then there's the name of the publication, and the name of the publication always comes after the article title and web page title, and the article title and web page title is always inside quotation marks. So depending on which one of these three things you have, okay, and usually group or organization is kind of the rarity. A lot of times you'll see group or organization if you're looking at government documents. Okay, so if you're using information from, say, the Bureau of Labor Statistics or census information, or I was talking to a student yesterday and she was using a source from the National Institute of Health. Um, so it's not like you'll never see those things. They do tend to be a little more rare than what you'll see with article title or webpage title or authors' names. But yeah, when you're working with a lot of government documents, usually the thing that will begin those entries are the name of the department that you're looking at. So whatever those three things are, and all you have to do is look at your works cited entries. That's why it's like I would say it's really difficult to do in-text citations correctly without having your works cited entry done. Once you have that works cited entry, you can see what the first piece of information is. And then you'll know that's what I need to put in my sentence. Okay. So, so if I just name the source inside the sentence, so let's see here. Let's do an example. I'll show you that in a minute. So inside the course content section, inside the week 1 content, if you go down to MLA format, there is the sample research paper. So that's what I'm going to be using for my example right now. So you can either open that up or you can just follow along with me. So this is the sample research paper. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to go down and look at their works cited page. Okay. Now this is like an English paper, meaning like an English literature and English language paper, not like an English composition paper. So a lot of what you're seeing here um, for the sources that they used, and this is like a 600 level class too, so it's probably like a graduate level class. So these are going to be like really interesting, legit sources. Well, for me, I mean, I'm an English major, so that's why I care. But a lot of what you're going to see here is sources that begin with an author. Okay. You do have a couple of instances where you have the article title or web page title inside quotation marks being the first piece of information. Okay. But everything else that this student is using has an author. Okay. So let's just say, for just the sake of an example, that I wanted to use this source right here. Okay. So the name of the author is Gladys Baker, but we have an et al. Okay, so that means that more than Gladys Baker wrote this. So there's 4 or more authors listed for this source. The name of the book, as you can see, it's italicized. So that's going to be a book. Century of Service, the first 100 years of the United States Department of Agriculture, published by the federal government in 1996. Okay. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I was using this source in my paper. Okay. Well, first thing that I want to do is, first time you bring a source into your paper, if possible, try to give sources legitimacy. So what I mean by that is, say who this person is, say who this author is, okay? So maybe we'll use another example, something a little more topical. Okay, so I'm gonna throw out a little poll here because I am a little curious. Okay, so I just posted a poll. So if you have an answer, please go ahead and put your response into the poll right now. Okay, so still waiting on 4 people. So Ariel, Anthony, Bennett, and Diana. Or sorry, Diana, my bad, Diana. Okay, Ariel, Anthony, and Diana, wake up, come on. Need your response. Okay, so let's bring up one of these articles. Okay. Okay, yeah. Let's get something that's not an opinion, but something that's an actual news story. Okay, let's do this one. What's a visual story? Wait a minute, that's not going to work. Let's do this one. All right. See, I've been looking at the Washington Post. That's why it's doing this. I don't want to subscribe. Let's try. Sorry. Let's try something different. CNN won't flag me. Okay. Let's do this. Okay, so we've got an article here that's titled "Kentucky AG," that's the Attorney General. Yes, I'm using an ad blocker. Didn't seek murder charges in Breonna
all heard mention of
Taylor case. So we've got Rob Fresh and Elizabeth Joseph writing for CNN. Okay. So if I was going to use this in my paper, I would say something like, okay, because if I don't know who, or if my audience doesn't know who Rob French and Elizabeth Joseph are, they're going to be like, why should I care? But if I say, are we getting his name wrong? Back and forth. He and Elizabeth Joseph from CNN writes blah 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 blah. Okay. I'm not just saying their names. I'm saying where they're from. Okay. So that lets my audience know a little bit about these authors. Like, why should I care? Always be thinking that. Why should your audience care? You know, what's the legitimacy of the information that you're bringing into your paper? Okay, that's really important because if you can't legitimize them, that may cause your audience to be a little skeptical. Okay, that's why a lot of times when you're pulling stuff from the databases, they may have like a little blurb there about who the author is, and you may be wondering like, well, why? It's so you can make that determination. Do you trust them? You know, if they work for some place that you trust, then, you know, that's going to be something where you can go, well, you know, maybe my audience is going to get behind me a little bit more because the source that I'm using is a good source. Okay. Whereas if you use a source that is considered biased or not credible, when your audience sees that you're using that, that's going to cause them some problems. I mean, think about it in your own life. When you hear somebody saying something, okay, about whatever topic that you're thinking of, if it's something that you trust, you're willing to listen more, right? Whereas if it's from somebody or some place that you don't trust, the likelihood that you're going to go along with what is being said really goes downhill, okay? So that's the premise behind doing this. And it doesn't matter what class you're doing this for. This is not just for English class. You're really supposed to be taking everything that you learn in this class and applying it to other papers that you write in other classes. Um, you want that legitimacy. You want your audience to trust you. That's a really big deal, okay? So telling your audience where these people are coming from inside the sentence, because if I didn't say that, if I said Rob Fries and Elizabeth Joseph said, and I didn't say, okay, they're from CNN, then my audience has to flip to the works cited page and look them up and say, well, where is this information coming from? So if you give it to them in the sentence, then they don't have to sit there and do that, okay? So they don't have to take that time to go and do that. And that's good. You don't, again, you don't want to be wasting anybody's time. That's not good. So the first time you bring that source into your paper, because any source that you have in your works cited page can be used multiple times. I know that sometimes people get confused about that, and I have students that will put their works cited entries in their works cited page in the order that they use them in their paper, thinking that that's how they have to correspond, instead of doing it through alphabetical order, okay? And the problem with that is, well, what if you use that source more than one time? Are you going to list them more than one place in your works cited page? No, you don't need to do that, okay? That's why you list them in alphabetical order, so when people are going back and forth between the draft and the works cited page, it's really, really super easy for them to find that entry, okay? But yeah, using good, credible, reliable sources is important. I've already had some students asking me questions about paper 2 and the fact that, you know, you have to use at least one source for paper 2, and them saying, do we have to use the databases? And I'm like, well, no, but if you're not using the databases, that means you have to be that much more careful, because whatever you're using as a source needs to be something that your audience, which in this case is the people in this class and me, are going to find trustworthy and credible. Because if you're using something that's not, you know, that really diminishes your authority as the author, okay? So that's why it's so important to consider the legitimacy of the information that you're using when you are working with sources, and always keeping your audience in mind, because that's something that sometimes people have some problems with. You may think something is a credible, reliable source, but is it something that your audience will think is credible and reliable? Okay? Because again, you're not writing your paper for you, you're writing your paper for your audience. Okay? And if they don't trust you, that's a huge problem. you know, that's going to really diminish your capacity to be successful in your paper. And of course, you don't want that. Okay. So it is best practice that anytime you bring a source in, the first time you're using it, whether you're summarizing, paraphrasing, or direct quoting, you say the legitimacy of that source. Okay. Now, it may be that you don't know. Okay. If you're working with something that doesn't say who the heck the author is. Okay. Or maybe you're using a source from, or information from a source, and you don't really know that much about the source. Maybe it's some journal that you've never heard from about, published in Australia. You don't know the legitimacy of that. You're like, well, it's in the databases. And honestly, literally, if it's from the databases, you're going to be very, very safe. You're on safe ground when you use the databases. Okay. But but once you travel outside that and you start finding different stuff, you really have to sit there and question yourself about, is this legit? And that's why those checklists that you've seen already in the sections that we've read in your rules for writers are so useful. Okay. Making sure, okay, well, is this information recent? Are you clicking on a bunch of links on the site and they're, 404 dead errors and they don't go to some place, or they don't go to the place where they say they're going to go? Are there spelling errors? All these things are like little red flags waving that say, don't use this. Okay. So you have to be super careful. Okay. Now, once you've established the credibility of a source in your paper, then there's really no need for you to keep saying it over and over again. Sometimes I'll get students that overcorrect and do the opposite. Like every single time they use the source, they say what the source's legitimacy is. You don't have to do that. Once you establish that the first time you use it, you don't have to keep repeating yourself. Okay. So any other time that you use that source in the paper, then you can go ahead and do parenthetical citation. And that's what we saw in the plagiarism exercises, and you'll see more in the in-text citation exercises for this week. And it's called parenthetical citation because it uses parentheses. Okay? So any other subsequent use of the source in my paper, blah, 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 I can just go parenthetical citation right there. I'm going to be using the last names of the authors. Okay. Since this is an online article, I'm not going to have a page number. Okay. You only really need to worry about page numbers if you're using something with actual pages. That's just how that works. And websites, unless it's like a PDF file, like the thing that I'm looking at now, this originally was a physical paper. Okay. And it's got page numbers. So if I was quoting from this paper, which you could do, I mean, I just downloaded a dissertation from someone, and I'm going to be checking that out to see if I want to use it for something that I'm building. So if it's something that's even like a dissertation from someone's like master or PhD thesis work, you can cite that. And of course, it has page numbers because it's a PDF file. So in that sense, you could include the page numbers. So if what you're working with has page numbers, obviously you need to use them. If not, you don't have them there. Okay. Okay. So those are the two main ways that you have in-text citation. Okay. Now, again, different formats do different things. So, like, you may eventually start using a format that requires all endnotes or all footnotes. But once you get into your academic discipline and start learning those individual formats, then you don't have to, worry so much about that because you'll learn those once you get to them. But at this point, right now, the two main things you'll be incorporating or using are MLA or APA in the classes that you take. So you're either going to be using the methods that you see here, and that's all you're going to be using, is either you're going to name the source inside the sentence, or you're going to have the parenthetical citation. The biggest difference between MLA format and APA format is that with APA format, you have to include the year of publication, okay? And you don't do that in MLA. Also, when working with authors' names in APA format, they never have the first names of people. They always just use abbreviations. Okay, so that's another thing. But obviously, our focus is on MLA, so this is the way we'll be doing it. Okay. All right, so before we start looking at some examples of this and how the two different things work together, does anyone have any questions about in-text citation? Okay, Iris, go ahead.
I'm a little confused on our parenthetical citations. So
Okay.
when we are referring to our, not our, would it be our authors then? Joseph and Perez, for
Yeah, so
example.
yeah, in this case it would the last name of this person is I guess it's Frez, and the last name of this person is Joseph.
So we would only use our people's last names after our sentence.
If you're citation, you're only including authors' last names.
Okay.
The only thing that changes is if you have two different sources and authors that have the same last name. So if I had a source from John Smith and another source from, I don't know, Jane Smith, you see those listed inside the works cited page. Um, Obviously, if I put Smith, my audience is going to be like, well, are they using John's work or are they using Jane's work? So in that sense, and even then, I couldn't even put the first letter of their name because they both start with the same thing. So I would do Smith, Jane, okay, in my parenthetical citation to show which source I'm using in that instance. Is that what you're asking?
And yes, I just got a little confused because I saw both of their last. So yes, that did help. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Yeah, and that's an important thing. Of course, that doesn't happen very often, as you can probably imagine. Another difference is if you have two works from the same author, which I'm going to show you in the examples, you would want to include also the second piece of information in the entry as well as the first piece of information so that your audience can tell which source you're using in which instance. I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. The article I used from the database didn't state the author, it just said Gale in context. Um, so I would need to see the entry in order to note that because Gale in context is actually the name of the database. So that entry would not begin with Gale in context, it would begin with the article title or web page title inside quotation marks. So I would have to see the entire entry of the source that you were working with in order to be able to make that distinction. But yeah, that's why I was saying earlier, like it's really super hard to do in-text citations without your works cited entry because you have to see what that first piece of information is, so that you know what to use for the in-text citation because the in-text citation is based specifically on the works cited entry. Yeah. Okay, so let me show you some examples of this in some papers. Okay. So just going back to the sample paper, and obviously you can check this out as many times as you want. If I'm looking in order to try to see how these different things match up, okay? So I've got my entries in the works cited page. So I'm going to go back up to the top, and I see, for example, in the introduction, this student has named someone inside their sentence, okay? Um, so I would say, okay, obviously the student is referring to someone. So, but I don't see a page number. I'm not seeing any quotation marks. So I go back down to here and I'm looking, and here I find the entry for what the student was using. Okay, she was looking or referencing this Damari book called The American Agricultural Press, 1819 to 1860. Okay, so I'm like, oh, okay. She's referencing the entire work because there's no specific page number, and she's giving it as an example. She even says an example, for example. Okay. What you'll notice though is her introduction doesn't have citations in it. And this is pretty common for all different levels of papers. Unless you're doing some of the tactics that I talked about, like if you were doing like a quotation from someone or using a startling fact or shocking statistic, most of the time when you're writing your introduction, the introduction is all you. It's all about you saying, okay, this is what this paper's about. So it is not surprising to see introductions with no citations because the student is writing everything out that they need to let their audience know before they start getting into the content. So again, always kind of think of that introduction as the roadmap for where you're going to take your audience and giving them some insight into what you're going to be talking about. Is it not recommended to what? Not to cite anything in the intro. Like I said, there are some tactics that people can use, like quotation and like startling fact or statistic, that would require citation. Okay, and those are really good tactics. Okay, so it's not like you're never going to see citations in introductions, but you certainly shouldn't have like a lot of heavy data in your introduction when you're trying to let your audience know this is what this is going to be about, what the paper is going to be about. You want to save a lot of the major content for your body paragraphs. So yeah, sure. Um, and also kind of check this out. You know, this paper is 8 pages. Okay, there's 2 pages for the works cited page. So this is an 8-page paper. Look at how long the introduction is. It's only about a half a page. Okay. So again, your introductions tend to be proportionate and your conclusions to the overall length of your paper, which is why introductions tend to not be too incredibly long for papers up to 10 to 15 to 20 pages, whereas they get certainly longer the longer your papers become. Okay. All right. So this one has headings, which you're really not supposed to use in MLA format too much. That's more a convention of APA format. The whole goal of MLA format is that uh, your topic sentences are doing the work. They are telling your audience what that paragraph is about. Okay. So coming down here, really haven't seen a lot of use, but here I'm seeing something that definitely needs citation. Okay. Information about the 1820 census. Over 10 million people were living in America, and of those 10 million, over 2 million were engaged in agriculture. So I need to see a citation here. So if there's not something in her works cited page about the 1820 census, then she's plagiarizing. So let's come on down here. Let's see. Do I have anything on the 1820 census? I do not. So I would be all kinds of all over this paper because this is a huge problem. Okay. She has very, very specific information here, and there is absolutely no citation. So that would be something that at this point would potentially get her an F on this paper. So yeah, can't do that. But we come down to the next paragraph, and here we've got a quote and another quote. And here we have a source. Okay, now she didn't say who Danhoff was. Okay, so not too happy about that, but we do have the source and we do have the page number. So I go down to look for my Danhoff source. Boom, right here. Okay, so that's what she's using. Clarence Danhoff's Change in Agriculture, the Northern United States, 1820 to 1870, from Harvard University Press. It was published in 1969, and she says she was using page 5 to get those quotes. So I know that if I get that Danhoff book and I go to page 5, I'm going to be able to find this quoted material. So if you are citing something from an article, would you just write the number? No, you don't cite paragraphs. No. Okay. So here she's giving us some information about the urban population in 1820, but we've got an indicator for a footnote, so I'm going to go down here. Oh, okay, she's using endnotes instead of footnotes. Okay, she says that's from Danhoff. Okay, and it's on page 11. All right, so she covered herself on that one. She did it in a weird way, but she covered herself. Okay. We go down a little bit further. Here's another use of Danhoff. We've got another quote in that sentence. So that's from page 7 of Danhoff. Then we come down here to the next sentence, and there's no quotation marks, so we know that this is either a summary or a paraphrase. And she's talking about hurt. Okay. So I'm looking for a source that starts with hurt. And here it is, hurt. So this is R. Douglas Hurt, American Agriculture, A Brief History, Iowa State University Press, 1994. Okay. So this is what you're doing. This is hopefully what you're seeing, is that whenever the source is used in the paper, the parenthetical or in-text citations are meant to show you just a little marker of what source is being used. You're not taking up a lot of space in your actual paper with citations, okay? Because it's just a marker, an indicator. That's why citations tend to be so small, okay? Because all you need is to be able to point to what source you're using inside your works cited page so your audience can find that information, okay? Let's look at a different example here. Okay. So this paper isn't in MLA format, but the citations are in MLA format, so that's why I'm going to use it. Okay. Now you do have to be careful because just because you're seeing parentheses doesn't mean that you're dealing with a citation. So, for example, in this first line where you see Pinkuinga, okay, that is the original language of what's being said here. Okay, the translation is pink film. Okay, but in Japanese it's Pinkuinga. Okay, so be careful. Don't just assume that every single time that you're seeing parentheses that you are seeing something that is a citation. Okay, and a really good rule of thumb to use on this is that citations, parenthetical citations, are always at the end of the sentence before the ending punctuation. Okay, so that helps. Okay, whereas you're seeing other things popping up in this or these sentences that are in parentheses, but they aren't citations. Okay, always have your citations at the end of the sentence, no matter where in the sentence that you're using the material. Sometimes I'll see students doing that, where they'll have like a quote in the middle of their sentence, and they'll put like their citation, their parenthetical citation, in the middle of the sentence. And that's not where it goes. No matter where the quote begins or ends, or the summary or paraphrase begins or ends in the sentence, your parenthetical citation always goes at the end of the sentence. Okay. All right, so here's the first citation that I'm seeing here. It's the word midnight inside quotation marks. So I should be able to go down to the works cited page and see a source that begins with the word midnight inside quotation marks. Okay, so I'm going to go down. Okay, so here it is. Okay, Midnight Eye interview. Now what you'll notice is that, okay, there's obviously more than one word in this title. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, why does it only say midnight up in the in-text citations? Okay, the reason why is, again, what you're using for that parenthetical citation, that marker inside your sentence, is meant to be brief. If I had other sources in this paper that began with the word midnight, I would include more of the title of this article. Okay. But the source before it is Todd McCarthy. The source after it is Jasper Sharp. Okay. So there's no other entry that begins with the word midnight. So just by having this as my in-text citation, I am able to specifically point down to that one source in my works cited page. Okay. I've had students before that will literally put their entire works cited entry in their parenthetical citation. And it's like that's not what the goal of the in-text citation is. The goal of the in-text citation is to show your audience just this is the source I'm using here. Okay. And it's all about indicating down to which source in your works cited that you're looking at. Okay. Okay, so let's keep going here. So I go and I see again, this is since this paper is using it's about a Japanese film, so that's why a lot of times you'll see indicators for translations of what that looks like in Japanese. But in this one, I've got another uh, parenthetical citation. We see that it's inside quotation marks, and that's another thing that you also have to keep in mind. If it's something that's inside quotation marks in your works cited page, it also has to be in quotation marks in your in-text citation. Okay. So you see the word asama, you see that it's in quotation marks, so I should be able to go down into that works cited page and find an entry that begins with the word asama, and it's an article title, so it'll be inside quotation marks. So I go down. Okay, and here it is. Okay. Asama Sanso incident. Okay, I know that it's from 50 years of NHK television. Publisher was NHK Japan Broadcast Corporation. It was published in 2003 to the web. I got it April 21st, 2014, and there's the URL. Okay. What's that little number for? Okay, so I'm using a footnote. Okay, went too far. Okay, because endnotes and footnotes in MLA format at least are for you want to provide additional information or clarification on the thing that you're talking about. So what I say here is Wakamatsu's then company, Wakamatsu Pro, went through a difficult 1970s with government censorship as well as police surveillance after the Osama Mountain Lodge incident in 1972. So then in my footnote that's down at the bottom of the page, I explain what the Osama Mountain Lodge incident was. So in case my readers don't know what that is, I'm giving them a little bit of insight about what happened. Okay. So it's not something that I would contain inside my paragraph because it doesn't go with what my paragraph is talking about. But I felt that for people that might be reading it that didn't know what that was, that I put that information in there. So that's a footnote. Your footnotes are for explaining things in your paragraph that you think your audience may not know. Yeah, sometimes people use that for giving definitions. That's another reason why people use footnotes. So yeah, good point. Yeah. Okay. So then I keep going, keep going. My next sentence got another citation. Okay. So this says sharp 274. So we have a number, so that means this is something that has page numbers. Okay. So I'm going to go down. Okay. And here we go. The author is Jasper Sharp. The article title is Wakamatsu Koji. It's in the Historical Dictionary of Japanese Cinema, published by Scarecrow Press in Lanham, Maryland. That's pretty cool. In 2011, and I used pages 273 to 274, and it's a print source. Okay. So it's all about creating that level of trust and legitimacy between you, the author, who's gathering this information and presenting it in your paper, and your audience, who is like, I want to make sure that the things that I'm reading are good and well researched. They want to trust you. You want them to trust you. So that's how you take care of that. And also there's beyond legitimacy, the sources that you use in your paper, whether it's a book or an article or a web page or the other dozens and dozens of things that you can use as a source in your paper. Those people had to work hard to create that content to present to you, okay? So it's acknowledging what they did. It's giving them credit, okay? Um, oh, I have definitely seen that before. Um, to would I see that print was used in the citation below. What would I write if it was an online article? So this particular paper I started working on in 2014, and MLA format has updated. So if you look at what I was doing back then, usually there's a distinction between writing whether something is web or if something is print. Okay. Um, as you can see, I don't really have a lot of print. A lot of the stuff that I had was online. But if something was on the web, see, that used to be part of the old MLA format. So whenever I go to revise this, I'm going to have to revise all of my citations to the current version of MLA format. Okay, so what I was looking to do today is to provide clarification on in-text citation, how it functions, why we do it, why it's important, um, depending on how you incorporate your sources. Okay. Oh, and I said I was going to show you an example of um, when you have two sources by the same author. So I think I have that in the other one that I got. Give me 1 second. Do I? If not, I can always show you another one. Hang on. This one's long. Okay, this one doesn't have two works by the same author. Let me show you. Hang on. Um, okay, citing multiple works by the same author. So in this instance, they have noted the name of the author here and then included the second piece of information. So this is a short story or an article, and this is another one. So that's what the articles would look like. This would be if you were citing two different books by the same author, so you've got the name of the person. Okay. Um, and what it would look like, we'll actually get more into that when we start looking at different special examples and works cited entries. But yeah, you not only include the first piece of information from the author, but also the second piece of information for that work, so that your audience can tell the difference between when you're using this article or this work or this book and when you're using the other one. So it would look kind of like if I was looking at two different books from Yukio Mishima, because that's who I write about, and I had, let's see, Temple of the Golden Billion, and then I had Patriotism. I have one novel and one short story. So my citation of the first one would be Shima, comma, Temple, and the second would be Shima, comma, Patriotism. So by including that second piece of information from the entry, my audience can tell when I'm using one source versus another. Whoops. Camera's leaving me. Sorry. I'll have to fix that. Okay, so does that answer your question? It looks like it did. Does anyone have any other questions about any of the material that I've gone over today in regards to in-text citation? Oh, there goes the camera again. Woo-hoo. Yeah, one word can be sufficient as long as it's indicating what that first piece of information in the citation is down in the works cited page. Because that's really the only thing that in-text citation is doing, is an indicator for where the source is in your works cited page. And a second, like what I was talking about in here, is letting your audience know what that source is or who that the legitimacy of that source. Yeah. See citation of what? Do you mean like do something like that? No, no. You don't need the word see. The whole premise behind in-text citation is that it is showing you the work in the works cited page. So if the audience wants to see it, they'll just look at the works cited page. Yeah, you don't need to put the word see. Yeah, you just have to put the citation. No, that might be part of some other kind of citation format, but it's not part of MLA or APA. Do you remember where you saw that? See appendix. Okay, so that's that's different. So when they're asking you to see a particular section of the book, that means that they're referencing it outside the context of citing. They just want you to go and look at that part. So they're not citing it, they're directing you to go and look at something. Citation is all about, I'm using this source here. If you're saying somebody say see something, that means they're not citing it, they're not using it there, they just want you to go and look at it. Right. Context. Yeah. Yeah. Like if you had, because oftentimes what you'll see that in papers that have an appendix, or see figure 1, or see chart 2, or stuff like that, they are directing your attention to go and look at something within their paper, which that isn't a citation. They're just directing you to go and look at that. Yeah. You can do that, but you would have to have an appendix or a chart or a graph or whatever it is. And for the papers that we do in this class, that's not going to be something that pops up. It may be something that pops up in another paper that you do in another class, which is perfectly fine. Um, yeah, that's fine. You can do that, but you won't see that happening too much here. But yeah, that's something you can definitely do, depending on the context of what you're trying to write. Yeah. Okay, sure. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So, before we leave, I need for Chris, Deanna, Jeremaine, you guys need you to hang out. So for everyone else, since you don't have any more questions, you can go ahead and go. For the three of you that I just mentioned, Chris, Deanna, and Jeremaine, hang tight because I'm going to be sending you some private messages. So, Ariel, everything for this paper is already posted in week 6, and the lecture from Tuesday, you'll want to review that. Hey, Chris, I sent you an email. Can you please check your email? Okay, so Jeremaine and Deanna, I sent you private messages. I need you to respond, please. Okay. BIMNet, I sent you a couple of emails this morning. Did you have a chance to check them out?